Did you find out about square foot gardening, but you don't know if it's worth a try? You came to the right place, because in this video I'll tell you why, in my opinion, square foot gardening is the best gardening method for a beginner. Having a gardening method to follow when you start gardening is one of the best ways to make your first gardening experience easier and in the end more enjoyable. When I started my small garden quest, I know I had a lot of questions. When to start planting, what is the optimal plant spacing, what is the best beginner planting layout, and so on. By having a gardening method to follow when you start gardening, you'll have most of the answers provided by the method of your choosing. In my case, square foot gardening. One note here, not all gardening methods are great for beginners. Some of them are extremely good to follow, but if you start your first year with them, you'll be disappointed. If you find this content valuable, please share it in your gardening community to let others know about this simple beginner gardening method. So without further ado, let's find out why square foot gardening is the gardening method you should start with. One of the most important properties that a beginner gardening method must have is that it needs to be easy to understand and follow. You don't need a gardening method that requires you to read 4 books and go to one online course just to understand the basic of it. You need a fast learning gardening method with just few easy steps to follow, and square foot gardening definitely falls under this category. You can learn the basics in just one day by watching a video playlist that I'll leave a link in the comments below. Or if you want to go more in depth, you can read a short book by Mel Bartholomew, the inventor of square foot gardening. Last year, when I started gardening, because I spent a lot of time building my first garden, I didn't have much time left to learn a new gardening method. But square foot gardening had essentially just a few steps to follow, and it was perfect for the occasion. Another problem you're facing when starting your first gardening experience is how your garden layout will look like. This can be a scary thing to figure out your first gardening year. You're probably asking yourself how to position all the rows and blocks, where your plants will be. A solution that square foot gardening is giving us is that you don't need to try figure out the entire layout of your garden, but instead try to focus on smaller chunks. In our case, a 4x4 raised bed or a 4x8 raised bed. And later on, by combining the smaller sections, you'll have your layout for the entire garden. As you can see, I did my first year with 4x12 raised beds, but then I optimized even further my second year with even smaller, bite-sized layout chunks made out of 4x4 raised beds. When designing a layout for such a small area, I can be more focused on what are the best companion plants for my vegetables and what plants have a common pest, so I can easily protect them. The next obstacle to overcome when starting a new garden is figuring out all the plant spacings. Because after all, if you are planting your vegetables too close, they won't grow properly, and if you're planting them too far apart, you'll waste your precious gardening space. As the name suggests, square foot gardening will provide you with all the plant spacings not in rows but in modular 1 square foot blocks. So if you divide your raised bed into even smaller chunks that are 1 square foot and make a layout with this in mind, you'll know the exact amount of plants you need to plant or seeds you need to sow per raised bed layout. I know that when I was researching how much space I would need to dedicate to, let's say, tomatoes in my raised bed, I found out a lot of numbers. From planting them 2 feet apart to planting them as close as 1 foot apart. So it was troubling to choose one of many plant spacing that I found. But then, when I decided to follow square foot gardening, I found out that all I need was 1 square foot per tomato, if I trellis them and 1 stem prune them. And that's what I did, and the results were amazing. I didn't waste my precious gardening space with a larger spacing, nor I didn't compact them too close. And with the planned spacing come one overlooked benefit of square foot gardening. It all looks neat and organized, like you're gardening for ages. All the plants have the same distance from each other, and they're all fitted perfectly inside 1 square foot block. By having a more organized and beautiful garden, it will give you a greater incentive to go and visit it and take care of it. And by taking care of your garden, in the end you will enjoy more in it, especially when the time to harvest will come. For me, having all the plants planted in their dedicated square foot, it looks more pleasing to the eye. This is also why I redesigned my garden this year to have it more of a square shape, so all the square spacings will fit nicely into the design. If you're finding value in this type of content, smash that like button to let me know. Did you know that your gardening soil is the most important part of your garden? Usually, a beginner gardener will have the same fears regarding its gardening soil. Is the soil amended enough? Will it have enough nutrients to feed my plants? And so on. And the biggest mistake that gardening beginners make regarding their soil is that they amend it too much or too little. By having a soil mix recipe that has proven to be effective year after year, you don't need to worry that it won't work. And so-called Mills mix is a good starting soil mix. It has all the nutrients your plants will need, and has all the water retention properties, so you won't need to water your garden every day. And it's so fluffy that you almost won't need a digging tool when planting your plants. I know I failed to use this mix last year because I was in a rush and I didn't know better. But this year I prepared 1 raised bed with this mix, and I will test it thoroughly to see how much better it is compared to my other soil mixes. Before we continue, let me know by commenting yes if you think square foot gardening is for you, or tell me why you think it's not for you. All the components for the soil mix were readily available at my local gardening store, and they will set you back around $40 per 4x4 raised bed that is 6 inches high. I know that I built my raised beds taller, but this is because this area gets flooded a lot in heavy rains. This is another thing you need to consider when choosing your starting gardening method. Having a setup that is readily available and that will not cost you a fortune. Yes, I know that square foot gardening is not the cheapest gardening method out there, but in my opinion it will give you the most bang for your buck, the first year gardening. Also, the raised beds are not so hard to construct. I made a video on how to make a raised bed with only 2 pellets, and you can go check it out by checking the link that pops on the top right corner. By having all these guidelines in place, with square foot gardening, you will have an easier time to start your first garden and produce a lot of vegetables. After all, square foot gardening promises that you'll have a garden with 100% of fertility in only 20% of space, with 5% of seeds and 2% of work, compared to traditional row gardening. Now, if you want to learn about the basics of square foot gardening, I have a perfect video for you. Just click on the icon that pops on the screen. There, you will learn how square foot gardening delivers on all the promises. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe to my channel if you want to learn about square foot gardening and other gardening related stuff. Happy gardening!